What's up, gamers? Hope you guys are all having a great day today, just full of so much positivity and happiness, dude. Because whenever I look at my comment section, there's always one comment in particular that makes me laugh, and that's when someone calls me either a Sony pony or an Xbot, bro, because this is absolutely hilarious, because depending on whatever video it is that I'm uploading that particular day, I get called either one or the other, which is actually pretty hilarious considering the fact that I actively shit on both of these platforms, fan bases, and first-party games at pretty much every given opportunity. I don't really like anything that PlayStation or Xbox has been doing recently when it comes to either the Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5, whether it be their business practices or the games that they've been releasing lately. In fact, I think Xbox and PlayStation have a huge problem when it comes to not only the quantity of first-party output, but especially the quality, which, you know, I'm sure a lot of people will debate me on, but I am of the mindset that I really don't give a fuck about any of these companies at this point. I think Starfield and Spider-Mid 2 are equally dog shit, and neither game has any business being nominated for as many awards as either one has. In my opinion, bro, the fact that Spider-Mid 2 got Best Narrative after playing that dumpster fire of a fucking story is a complete and total joke. And the same thing goes with Starflop, dude. How the fuck is that even in the running for Best RPG? But what we're going to be talking about here today is the long-rumored Xbox tax, bro. And just to be upfront about this entire thing, I'm just going to say this. The Xbox tax conspiracy theory has to be the biggest load of cope I think I have ever seen from fucking Xbox fanboys in my time on this wonderful website known as YouTube.com, bro. This entire conspiracy theory that somehow just because a game releases on Xbox, apparently that immediately hurts it in the review scores, when in a lot of cases, the majority of these games that are coming out that are quote-unquote getting hit with the Xbox tax are just not really that fucking great. And in a lot of cases, these games are insanely overrated, if you ask me. But anyway, let's go ahead and get right into this shit. Now, the origin of the Xbox tax dates all the way back 10 years ago to one of my personal favorite content creators of all time, and that, of course, is none other than the Crap Gamer.
Unscripted.
And well, back in those days, there was a lot of negativity surrounding the Xbox One for good reason going around social media at the time. So, in order to cope with the fact that his favorite console and favorite gaming platform was not getting the positive press coverage that he wanted it to, he created a theory called media bias, where all of a sudden, after the 360 generation having some of the most highly rated exclusive titles of all time for Microsoft, the games media decided that they were actually Sony fans this entire time, and now was the time to strike and automatically give all Xbox games moving forward lower review scores than their PlayStation counterparts. It was a massive industry-wide conspiracy theory that at the time went by the name called media bias. The Xbox tax name did not get added on until this generation, but in the past it was known as Xbox media bias, where journalists would deliberately give Xbox games lower review scores to help the PlayStation 4 outsell the Xbox like it needed any fucking help to do so. But not only did this conspiracy span across the entirety of games journalism and the games media, but it also extended to developers. Those same developers that in the past released extremely high-rated Xbox One and Xbox 360 exclusive titles, to the point where developers were even trying to sabotage the launch of games on the Xbox platform in favor of their PlayStation counterparts, and I think this culminated in its truest form with the Titanfall 2 disc controversy.
So anyway, I want to go into today's topic, which is this Titanfall 2 producer posts a picture of a PS4 disc, and I know there's a lot of people that are divided in this. Some are saying in the Xbox community, oh, a lot of Xbox fans are just over dramatic and all that, and I get that side of it, and a lot of the Xbox fans are like, man, this is really a slap in the face, and I get that as well. Here's the problem I have. Microsoft has the marketing rights to this game. game. You know, this guy could have easily just cropped the bottom of the PS4 logo out and been like, hey, look, here's the sexy disc, because the only difference is going to be an Xbox logo or a PlayStation logo. And this guy, Drew McCoy, got really kind of snarky on Twitter, where basically someone asked him about the Xbox disc, and he said, and he kind of took shots and said, green discs aren't sexy. So, I mean, you've got a marketing partnership with Microsoft. The first game is exclusive to Microsoft platforms. You're taking shots at an entire fan base, really. I mean, it's really disrespectful. A lot of the things that is going on, like refusing to go into the EA Access deal, you know, now this, and taking shots, and just the whole situation with the changes made to the game and all that, I just don't think that they're being very respectful to the Xbox fan base. And if you're just one of those people that thinks that it's just overreacting, that's fine too. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I just think that it would be, you know, helpful and beneficial to the game that you just try to be nice to all the fan base, I guess. I mean, Xbox fans are what made the game successful in the first place, and now to kind of get crapped on by one of the producers, I feel that that's very disrespectful and unfortunate, and hopefully, you know, that guy got talked to a little bit. I don't want anybody to lose their job or anything, but, you know, just to say that green discs aren't sexy is clearly just, you know, and then he kind of went back and forth multiple times with Xbox fans, just kind of just crapping on people. So I don't really understand the thought behind that. Nobody was threatening the guy or being mean or anything. They're just like, can you post a picture of the Xbox One version, you know?
But yeah, this continued throughout last generation as a coping method for Xbox fanboys to basically excuse the fact that Microsoft had been releasing subpar garbage in most cases when it came to their first-party exclusive lineup, an issue that has continued onward into this generation. So now that we know the beginnings of this entire conspiracy theory, it helps set the stage for the current place we're in right now, where Xbox fanboys are once again claiming media bias because Microsoft's quality control is not quite there yet. Now, I just want to establish something here before we get going here, because I think there's a important conversation we need to have here, because whether or not you like Sony games personally, I think is irrelevant, but what you have to recognize is that within the genre that Sony releases their games into, they are best in class. Personally, I hate the third-person, over-the-shoulder, semi-open world, narrative-driven, emotional movie simulator title that Sony releases over and over and over again. That entire format of video games is incredibly bland, boring, repetitive, and overall, I want nothing to fucking do with it. I personally despise that style of game, but I have to acknowledge that there obviously is a market for it, and when it comes to making those type of games, Sony does it better than everyone else. They have carved out a niche in the market. The people who like those games know that if they buy a PlayStation, they can expect a top-tier caliber level of those type of games consistently releasing on the PlayStation platform. And whether or not I personally like them is completely irrelevant, because I think it's a fucking tragedy what they've done to games like God of War. When you look at God of War 3 and then compare it to the current state of the franchise, which is basically a shitty Last of Us ripoff, where gameplay comes second and the boss fight and overall intensity has been dramatically toned down to this boring fucking emotional story of father and son. But, you know, that's an entirely different case entirely, because when you look at Microsoft by comparison, it looks like Microsoft is taking a scattershot approach. They're basically throwing enough shit against the wall and hoping that something sticks, while not being able to identify what made them successful in the past when it came to first-party titles, which was primarily outsourcing their first-party development to more talented third-party studios and signing marketing deals with those companies to produce a lot of dude bro and Western RPG content on their platform. Now, Microsoft recently has evolved this strategy, and instead of getting third-party partnerships, they're just swallowing up third-party developers. But an issue is occurring with that, is Microsoft's quality control standards are now being applied to these newly acquired companies, and their relaxed release schedule is also applying to them as well, which is leading to the deterioration of a lot of franchises and studios that in the past were releasing top-tier quality games, in my personal opinion. So I just want to establish that real quick. So whether or not you like Sony games or not personally, you have to acknowledge, at least on some level, that what they're doing works, and they have carved out their niche within the video game industry, whereas Microsoft is still struggling greatly to find its footing and identity of what it wants to be within the industry, which leads us to the situation of the Xbox tax. Now, the Xbox tax has been talked about this entire generation. You know, fanboys love to throw any blame and pass responsibility to anyone and everyone else to cope with the fact that Xbox exclusives are not scoring as highly as they want them to, so they can go and argue about it on Twitter and use it as some sort of gotcha moment against PlayStation fanboys. Like PlayStation fanboys throw Metacritic scores around to act like it's some sort of gotcha against Xbox fanboys, because apparently in a world of 40-year-old men arguing over video games online, none of them have enough money to afford multiple different platforms to play whatever the fuck they want whenever they want, which is pretty ironic. But recently, I would say Starfield is the game that brought the Xbox tax to the forefront of discussion in terms of the online gaming discourse, and the fact that it was not nominated for the Game of the Year award at the Game Awards, which who the fuck even gives a shit about that garbage heap? But anyway, a lot of Xbox fanboys are very upset that Starfield didn't get the praise they think it deserves, which I don't really care personally what games to get nominated for Game of the Year. Jeff Keighley does not determine which games I like or don't like personally, and I think more people should be of that mindset, but there seems to be this entire belief that Starfield is this insane, once-in-a-generation, never-done-before video game that literally raises the bar for AAA game development across the industry, which I think is absolutely comical, and it just shows you what a bubble these people live in, because if you actually go on Steam, which is the one place that you can actually find reviews from people who have verified amounts of time within a particular game, you will see a very different narrative being painted in real time. Of the 7,000 most recent reviews on Steam, only 48% of those are positive, which gives you a very different idea of the nature of Starfield's public reception when it comes to people who actually bought and paid for this game versus the game's media. Because I think by all estimates, the reviews given to Starfield were overly generous. I would give that game a 5 out of 10, and even then I think it's being generous because I can somewhat see the potential. But it's very interesting, man. We're talking about people who are literally hailing this game as the greatest game of the generation, where if this game was multi-platform like they love to claim in the other direction, I think they would be singing a very different tune. You know, they claim that if Starfield was a multi-platform title, it would be rated much higher, but on the other hand, I think that if this game was a multi-platform title, they would be rating it lower than they are right now. So I think it goes both ways, in all honesty. In fact, the current state of Starfield is so bad on PC that Starfield now has fewer Steam players than Skyrim does 2 months after launch. But Xbox fanboys will tell you this is just straight up media bias, dude. Everyone who plays Starfield thinks it's the second coming of Christ and literally has zero flaws whatsoever. So what gives? Why is it that the average person who is buying and paying for this game is not only rating it negatively, but the crowd that this game caters to is dwindling and they're going back to play other Bethesda games at this point? So I don't really think you can blame that on IGN giving it too low of a review score or the Game Awards snubbing it for Game of the Year, because that to me does not sound like Game of the Year material. It sounds like a deeply flawed game that, yes, while it was successful, definitely is not without its fair share of problems and issues that are 100% valid and cannot be simply written off, as Xbox fanboys would put it, oh, they would like it better if it was on PlayStation. Now let's go ahead and move on from Starfield. I think we've picked on that game enough. Let's go back to 2021, where Microsoft took home the award for Metacritic's Publisher of the Year. Now, you might be asking yourself, now hold on, how did Microsoft win Publisher of the Year from Metacritic, meaning that they had the highest aggregate Metacritic score for any video game publisher, if the media hates their games and rates them lower by default simply because they're Xbox titles, you know? That doesn't really line up with the narrative that we're hearing online from these Xbox fanboys. Like, what do you mean that Xbox was the highest rated publisher of video games in that particular year according to Metacritic, when by and large there's a mass scale media conspiracy conspiracy theory to automatically rate their games lower just because they're Xbox titles owned by Microsoft. This narrative also further disintegrates because a lot of Xbox fanboys will claim that a studio's games are highly rated before Microsoft purchases them, but then after Microsoft buys the studios, all of a sudden the games get absolutely lambasted in review scores, which we've seen countless examples of this being provably false. Forza Horizon, after being acquired by Microsoft formally in the form of buying Playground Games, has achieved its highest ever Metacritic ratings since Microsoft has taken ownership. Bethesda, for example, their last major game, Fallout 76, is significantly lower on Metacritic compared to Starfield, and a game like Hi-Fi Rush, which is nominated for several different categories at the Game Awards this year, achieved a very high Metacritic rating. So this entire narrative that just because Microsoft acquires a studio, their games automatically get rated lower is completely fucking laughable. Now, in the case of Hi-Fi Rush, just that game being as highly rated as it was, and then on top of that, the fact that it's been nominated for so many different categories at the Game Awards kind of disproves this entire theory that the entire games media, journalists, and the industry as a whole has this anti-Xbox agenda, because Jeff Keighley's 120 industry experts, quote-unquote, is literally made up of a bunch of games journalists. So if a bunch of games journalists are nominating a game like Hi-Fi Rush for all these different categories at the Game Awards, it means that there's actually a very large portion of people within the games media that are going out to bat for an Xbox-owned title. So this whole narrative further falls apart the more and more you look at it, and instead of pointing the finger where it truly belongs, aka Microsoft, Xbox fanboys are so quick to literally throw anyone and everyone else under the bus to come up with any sort of excuse to excuse the piss-poor publishing behavior of Microsoft in shitting out half-baked titles. I mean, the prime example I can think of is when you look at a game like Redfall, undisputedly one of the worst AAA games of this year. It had no business releasing in the state that it did. Not only was the game buggy and broken, but it was extremely bare bones, half-baked, and overall was a complete waste of developmental resources. Well, when you have some of the biggest Xbox fanboys with the biggest subscriber counts on YouTube defending that game despite all of its issues,
but gosh dang it, I've had so much fun playing it.
You start to build this narrative further and further among the extremist groups of Xbox fanboys that somehow it is just mentally conceivable that the entire industry at large, across the board, has some deep-rooted hatred for Microsoft and has created this covert operation to essentially ensure that no Microsoft game is ever properly rated, given a Game of the Year award, or receives the recognition they claim it so deserves. It couldn't just be the fact that Microsoft has yet to figure out their biggest problem with their platform, and that is the lack of quality and quantity when it comes to their first-party exclusive titles. And that is the real issue at hand, instead of some insane fucking Illuminati-level conspiracy theory to give Xbox games bad review scores, despite the fact that the people who actually buy and play these games a lot of times corroborate these review scores or expose the fact that a lot of these review scores are actually inflated to maybe a higher degree than they actually should have been, considering all the issues and problems people have when the games actually hit the market. But of course not, dude. It's easier to point the finger and blame everyone else for all of the problems facing your favorite piece of plastic, because you know what? That is the mentality of a bunch of 40-year-old man children on the internet who would rather argue about whose console is better than spend time playing the video games they claim to care so deeply about, dude. It is very ironic that a lot of these guys spend more time on Twitter than actually spending time playing these video games. And on top of that, how the fuck do these people have so much time to be on social media? I don't think a lot of them have jobs, bro, and maybe that's why they're so defensive over their favorite piece of plastic, because it's the only one they can afford. I have no idea, man. Now, of course, this is not exclusively an Xbox problem. It's just predominantly been in the news cycle recently, and I've gotten a ton of comments on my recent videos about the quote-unquote Xbox tax. And, people pointing the finger and calling me an Xbot, I think is absolutely hilarious, considering the fact that I would say I've been the most critical of Xbox lately because, you know, believe it or not, guys, I actually give a shit about the Xbox platform. If Xbox was back in its 360 days and they were cranking out fire games like that and the Xbox ecosystem was in the place that it was back then, maybe I would be an Xbot myself, but in the current form that Microsoft has put its gaming division, there's not really too much to be excited about in my personal perspective, but hopefully that'll change, man. You know, we're going on 10 years of Phil Spencer at this point, so maybe it'll finally get better. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on the so-called Xbox tax in the comment section below. I'm very interested to hear your take on this. Do you think there is some widespread, deep-rooted conspiracy theory across the video game industry where the games media literally is existing for the sole purpose of keeping Xbox in the eternal position of last place? Or do you think it's just the fact that Microsoft needs to get their shit together when it comes to releasing games like Redfall, Starfield, Crackdown 3, Sea of Thieves at launch, and many other games like Halo Infinite, Gears 5, you name it? It just seems like they have a very large issue with understanding what the fuck people actually want when it comes to releasing games, and they have to play catch up constantly because they just don't have a finger on the pulse of what the gaming community is looking for when it comes to releasing their first party titles. But hopefully it'll change, man. You know, again, 10 years of Phil Spencer, maybe we'll finally have something to show for it. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below, and if you did enjoy this video, make sure to drop a like on it. I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, I do want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to check out this video, and just for all the recent support on the channel lately, man. It has been absolutely insane. You guys have been absolutely killing it, and I've really been enjoying uploading consistent videos again recently. So appreciate everyone for putting up with my very opinionated ass. Let me just put it that way. So really appreciate all the support, everyone. But with that shit said, I will catch you guys next time.
My heart rages around like an ocean